Human Personality, and Its Survival of Bodily Death. Frederic W. H. Myers. Preface. The book which is now at last given to the world is but a partial presentation of an ever-growing subject which I have long hoped to become able to treat in more adequate fashion. But as knowledge increases, life rolls by, and I have thought it well to bring out while I can even this most imperfect textbook to a branch of research whose novelty and strangeness call urgently for some provisional systematization, which, by suggesting fresh inquiries, further accumulation of evidence may tend as speedily as possible to its own supersession. Few critics of this book can, I think, be more fully conscious than its author of its defects and its lacunae, but also few critics, I think, have yet realized the importance of the new facts which in some fashion the book does actually present. Many of these facts have already appeared in Phantasms of the Living, many more in the Proceedings of the Society for Psychical Research, but they are far indeed from having yet entered into the scientific consciousness of the age. In future years the wonder, I think, will be that their announcement was so largely left to a writer with leisure so scanty, and with scientific equipment so incomplete. Whatever value this book may possess is in great measure due to other minds than its actual authors. Its very existence, in the first place, probably depends upon the existence of the two beloved friends and invaluable coadjutors to whose memory I dedicate it now. The help derived from these departed colleagues, Henry Sidgwick and Edmund Gurney, although of a kind and quantity absolutely essential to the existence of this work, is not easy to define in all its fullness under the changed circumstances of today. There was indeed much which is measurable, much of revision of previous work of my own, of collaborative experiments, of original thought and discovery. Large quotations purposely introduced from Edmund Gurney indicate, although imperfectly, how closely interwoven our work on all these subjects continued to be until his death, but the benefit which I drew from the association went deeper still. The conditions under which this inquiry was undertaken were such as to emphasize the need of some intimate moral support. A recluse, perhaps, or an eccentric, or a man living mainly with his intellectual inferiors, may find it easy to work steadily and confidently at a task which he knows that the bulk of educated men will ignore or despise. But this is more difficult for a man who feels manifold links with his kind, a man whose desire it is to live among minds equal or superior to his own. It is hard, I say, for such a man to disregard altogether the expressed or implied disapproval of those groups of weighty personages to whom in other matters he is accustomed to look up. I need not say that the attitude of the scientific world, of all the intellectual world, then was very much more marked than now. Even now I write in full consciousness of the low value commonly attached to inquiries of the kind which I pursue. Even now a book on such a subject must still expect to evoke, not only legitimate criticism of many kinds, but also much of that disgust and resentment which novelty and heterodoxy naturally excite. But I have no wish to exalt into a deed of daring an enterprise which to the next generation must seem the most obvious thing in the world. Nihil ossi nisi vana contemnere will certainly be the highest compliment which what seem to us our bold independence of men will receive. Yet gratitude bids me to say that however I might in the privacy of my own bosom have dared to contemn things contemptible, I should never have ventured my amateurish acquirements on a publication of this scale were it not for that slow growth of confidence which my respect for the judgment of these two friends inspired. Their countenance and fellowship, which at once transformed my own share in the work into a delight, has made its presentation to the world appear as a duty. My thanks are due also to another colleague who has passed away, my brother, Dr. A. T. Myers, FRCP, who helped me for many years in all medical points arising in the work. To the original furnishers of the evidence my obligations are great and manifest, and to the Council of the SPR. I also owe thanks for permission to use that evidence freely. But I must leave it to the book itself to indicate in fuller detail how much is owing to how many men and women, how widely diffused are the work and the interest which have found in this book their temporary outcome and exposition. The book, indeed, is an exposition rather than a proof. I cannot summarize within my modest limits the mass of evidence already gathered together in the 16 volumes of Proceedings and the 9 volumes of the Journal of the SPR, in Phantasms of the Living and other books hereafter referred to, and in MS collections. The attempt indeed would be quite out of place. This branch of knowledge, like others, must be studied carefully and in detail by those who care to understand or to advance it. What I have tried to do here is to render that knowledge more assimilable by coordinating it in a form as clear and intelligible as my own limited skill and the nature of the facts themselves have permitted. I have tried to give, in text and in appendices, enough of actual evidence to illustrate each step in my argument, and I have constantly referred the reader to places where further evidence will be found. In minor matters I have aimed above all things at clearness and readiness in reference. The division of the book into sections, with appendices bearing the same numbers, will, it is hoped, facilitate the use both of syllabus and of references in general. I have even risked the appearance of pedantry in adding a glossary. Where many unfamiliar facts and ideas have to be dealt with, time is saved in the end if the writer explains precisely what his terms mean. F. W. H. Myers. Editorial Note. This unfinished preface consists of several passages written at different times by the author, who died on January 17, 1901. In 1896, he arranged that the completion of his book should be in the hands of Dr. Richard Hodgson in case of his death before its publication. In the meantime he had entrusted the general supervision of the press work and much of the detail in marshalling the appendices to Miss Alice Johnson of Newnham College, Cambridge, who has therefore been associated with Dr. Hodgson also in the editorial work needed for the completion of the book, and much the greater part of the labor involved has fallen to her share. At the time of the author's death, chapters 1 to 6, part of chapter 7, and the whole of chapter 8 were in the first proof, the rest of chapter 7 and chapter 10 were ready for printing. Most of the appendices were in type, but required much revision and rearrangement. The substance of nearly all chapter 9 had been written, in one form or another, but had to be pieced together. The asterisks on page 209, volume 2, mark the end of the part which had been consecutively composed by the author. Some of the questions involved in that chapter would doubtless have been treated much more fully by him had he lived to complete it. Mr. Myers left on record his wish to express gratitude to Mr. F. N. Hales, of Trinity College, Cambridge, for help in the preparation of some appendices, especially in chapters 2. N.V. Richard Hodgson. Alice Johnson.